Welcome back to Let's Talk Apprenticeships, where we talk all things apprenticeships, getting them, succeeding in them, and all the opportunities from them. So in this episode, this is episode number 6, we are going to talk about the interview process and a bit of time before and after that process. So we recently just spoke about the resume. We've talked about work experience. We've talked about where to find them, what they are. So now it's, the interview process is kind of almost like the final piece of the puzzle.
Yes, it's the target's there and you're there, almost there. So how do you get there?
Yeah, that's it.
Lovely. So I think you rightly said interview is an activity, a very important one, but there are things we do before and after the interview. So what do you think we should be doing before the interview?
So we've handed in our resume or applied for the job, whatever way whatever application process the business has. So before that, we can always have a follow-up call or a follow-up email from handing in our resume. Be like, hey, did you get my application? Hey, I applied. Let me know if there's anything I should do to prep for the interview. Just a little bit of a follow-up to show that you're really keen.
Certainly. And more than likely, most organizations will send you an email back. Mm-hmm. So if you've applied for an apprenticeship and most organizations will let you know a tentative time by when you should expect an email. Mm-hmm. So I would be checking my junk mail in that time too, just check your inbox. And if they have an option of multiple preferred methods of communication, then certainly provide your mobile number, the correct mobile number, and also tick that notify by SMS option. Mm-hmm. And as soon as just read through the email thoroughly as to what they want you to do. Mm-hmm. And most organizations will actually call you and say, hey, we're organizing some interviews. What's your availability? Mm-hmm. So I would, in anticipation, have something down as I'm available this time or not, or just ask questions. When's the earliest one I can get? Mm-hmm. And then you can try and making yourself available for that.
Yeah, that's it. And I think even before we get to interviews, something that businesses do either before, during, or after the interview process is aptitude testing.
Yes, they do that. And then depending upon, the type of role, there could be several things. And I know in the mechanical trades, they do mechanical aptitude, there's deductive reasoning, there's verbal ability. And I think one thing we sort of didn't touch base on, apprenticeship, the aptitude. Certain there is a requirement of language literacy and numeracy. Mm-hmm. So it's, gone are the days when people said, hey, there's no paperwork, just hands-on. No, there's a lot of paperwork to be done. So having said that, all those things are assessed by the employer through this aptitude testing, which certainly are run by professional organizations. You're right, aptitude testing is one. But then again, if you have got this interview call, then I would research about the organization. I will go through the job advertisement to look at what are the finer points of the job. Mm-hmm. And in apprenticeship, obviously, they're quite standard across the board. Mm-hmm. Expectations are, but it's good to be able to answer to each of those criteria with something which is from an experience point of view. So a relevant, specific example of a situation. For example, if they're looking for problem-solving skills, then make sure you have handy an example of problem-solving. Mm-hmm. And it could even be from your McDonald's job or I'm just using McDonald's all the time. I think we've had that for lunch.
we had it for lunch.
So that's why. But hey, plug in. But yeah, I think doing those little preparations will obviously put you in a good stead. Is there anything you reckon? See, if I'm the candidate, Louise, and you are the employer calling me to come for an interview, what are the things I should be asking you about the interview or the interview process itself?
I think, is there anything I need to prepare? Who will be there? I think they're the two main ones. And, especially confirming your location is really handy. So you don't be late, you don't get lost. So just simple things like that, like dotting your I's, crossing your T's to make sure you know where you're going. You can ask if you need to wear safety gear in case there might be a workshop tour or something involved, and covering those bases as well.
Certainly, and I would, to make and look, everything is making an impression. So, and more than likely, good organizations will provide all those things in the email itself. Mm-hmm. So don't not read that email and just go asking those questions, then you obviously, probably not haven't made a good impression. So if you've read that, then you can see, yeah, I've noticed you've got all that information in there. I had just one doubt about this, where, it could be on-site parking, it could be accessibility, and it could even be, hey, what do you want me to bring along? Do you want me to bring along another copy of the resume? Is there anything I need to bring to show, or even, do I have to do any other kind of preparation for that special? So, and that sometimes will put you in good stands and create a good impression. And sometimes, because even recruiters are people, and they do maybe 100 calls that day, and they might miss out a thing. So you asking those questions might make them remember a vital piece of information, and hey, you created a nice impression.
Yeah, that's it. And one thing that I've wanted to jump in, we're back to the aptitude testing, is a lot of the times you can Google aptitude testing and do practice ones.
Yes,
Yeah.
Definitely. And as I said, if you work to the criteria, prepare accordingly, and have examples handy, it's great. Another thing I now actually tell my clients to do is, make maybe a journal or a 4-page, notebook like that. Start writing those things. And it's totally okay to take that with you to the interview. So if you make those notes and you speak to that, I think, look, if you've done it 9 out of 10 times, you will remember. You'll never have to look at that. But if you have that with you, it's an extra impression, because I think modern employers are not looking for people who can remember everything. They're looking for people who can source and who can rely on tools like this, which make them reliable employee, which make them come across as team members and collaborators, rather than trying to be a genius at everything.
Yeah, that's it.
So that takes the pressure off you, and of remembering everything, but also say, yeah, I thought about that criteria and I have this example. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. And I think researching the company as well.
Oh, yes.
The company, sometimes they can often ask you, like, what do you know about us? That kind of thing. And you can be like, say, for the example of like a mechanic apprenticeship, you can say, oh, I know that you service these customers and you work mostly on mining equipment, or you produce these engines. Like, just having that to show that you've done a little bit of research and you know a bit about the company as well gives a really good impression.
Certainly. And one of the most popular questions, especially at the apprenticeship stage, is give us an overview of your resume. Now, if you haven't made your own resume, it's a bit hard. It doesn't matter if you haven't made, but at least familiarize yourself with the resume. Now, when they say give us an overview, doesn't mean you read for word. Just remember highlights of it. And also try to align that whole description or narration to the role itself. So highlight the bits which are relevant to the role. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's it. And often finish it by saying, is there anything else you would like me to say? And oftentimes they will say, no, that's plenty. Let's move to the question. Now, it's not that they haven't read the CV or resume. They want you to warm up with something familiar. So get that, okay? Utilize that time to warm up and ease into the interview. But at the same time, I think what they also look at is how can you present a information in a logical flow. And that's some things they're looking for.
Yeah, that's it. And I think even, so now we're in the interview, things to remember is you don't have to have all the answers, especially for an apprenticeship role. You're literally being employed to learn. So one of my favorite responses is to lend to people who are a bit nervous going into their interview is, if they do ask you a question that you don't know, say, hey, actually, I'm not too sure. Are you able to explain that a bit more so I do understand? And that's already showing that you have the skills to be a good apprentice, because you're saying, I don't know, can you explain it to me? And that's literally what you got to do for 4 years.
Absolutely. And true. And I think you touched upon a very important point. Oftentimes those questions are made by recruiters who have not worked in that function. So they can be very long questions. And more than likely, some of the interviewers have been told the night before that they're doing interviewing. They're interviewing someone to a certain form. So don't hesitate to ask them to rephrase the question. Don't hesitate to write down the question yourself and say, okay, the question is in 2 parts. can I answer the first part and second part, and then you make it easy for yourself. In that way, you are in a way taking charge of the process, and that's okay to do, because at the end of the day, again, I've been on this interviewing side, and the job, the pressure is also on the interviewers, by the way, to get most out of that candidate.
Yeah.
Because our aim is to give the candidate the best opportunity to express and communicate how they are suitable for that job. And look, apprenticeship is an entry-level job, as Louise rightly pointed out. It is not expected of you to know everything. If you knew everything, you wouldn't be doing an apprenticeship there. So what we'll look at is what can the candidate bring as a learner, which is necessary. And I think, again, there is a high emphasis on, in a way, working in a structured and unstructured environment, following instructions, problem solving, a bit of critical thinking, and of course, the language literacy and numeracy aspects of the job.
Yeah, that's it. And one thing that you can also do that makes you stand out a little bit is actually like asking the interviewees about, like the interviewers about themselves as well. Because they probably, asking these questions over and over again all day, and you'd be like, yeah, so how was your day? Like, that kind of thing. And that just kind of makes them feel a bit more human sometimes in a situation where they're doing something really repetitive.
Great. Now, look, the Australian community and even, the businesses are very inclusive. Everyone is now across diversity, inclusion and everything. And in a way, no one is asking people to wear a suit and tie to interview. However, we do want to make a good impression, right? So if you're going for an apprenticeship interview, what sort of attire do you suggest, Louise?
So for me personally, especially to the girls that ask as well, I always recommend something that's neat and clean, but especially for the girls, something that say if you're being interviewed by the supervisor, they can imagine you walking out onto the work floor in. So mine is like neat, clean, but you could actually walk and start working out in that. So for me, for example, like I usually wear enclosed shoes, so neat sneakers or some dress boots, more clean work boots. Neat jeans is usually my go-to, and a sensible t-shirt, shirt, clean work shirt. So it's professional, presentable, but then also, especially as women, there's not too far for the imagination to go to picture you working in the field.
Certainly. And for the boys, I would say, look, smart casual is the way to go. Doesn't mind. People don't mind if you're wearing a jeans, but not a torn jeans, right?
Yeah.
So if you can get a really simple trouser and a nice shirt, maybe from Big W or Kmart, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It still makes a good impression and clean and hair is nicely kempt, and doesn't matter if you have long hairs or whatever, just tied it up nicely. But I think the personality, the smiling, that sort of works well as well. So
your body language and your posture as well, like having your shoulders back and down, taking a few deep breaths before you go in. You might be nervous, like that's perfectly normal. But yeah,
and I think I'm glad you touched upon the enclosed footwear. It's important because most organizations will ask you if you want to do a tour of the workplace, and then you're not limited by wearing flip-flops, and they can't take you around and show you the workplace, because that is also the part of the interview process that you have a look, and sometimes they will ask you questions about what did you observe, things like that. So and certainly those aspects are important. But hey, Louise, what about arriving on time?
Yeah, all those little important things that they come into play, like I said before, confirm the location beforehand so you can arrive on time. Like, give yourself that 10-minute, 20-minute buffer at least, so then if you do get lost, you have the time to. But even that time will allow you to, my usual go-to, because I drive around a bit seeing apprentices and workplaces at the moment, I always find a McDonald's nearby so I can do the long part of the drive and then, find somewhere that's 5-10 minutes away, stop, recoup, kind of,
Go to the toilet.
Go to the bathroom, and then you still arrive early, but you're already refreshed and ready to go.
Perfect. Now that's great. And look, I used to run a life skills program, and one of the things was making a good impression. And then the exercise to give to the cohort is draw a caricature of someone going for an interview and I would give them professions, So going for a mechanical apprenticeship interview, going for a business traineeship interview, and then once they start talking, they get very imaginative about what they do. And I think people often know all of these things like hygiene and dressing well and punctuality and all that, even going to the toilet before you go to the interview. I think all of those, but it's oftentimes we forget. So hopefully through this podcast, people can find, all that information into one place. It's all about making that impression, not just for the role, but as an employee of the business, because businesses are not just looking for skills, they're also looking for behaviors.
Yeah,
behaviors which will help them to demonstrate the skills effectively and to be considered for further roles in the business.
And that's it. And I think it's important to, even though some of the things we've touched on are kind of simple everyday things, when you're nervous, you tend to forget the simple everyday things. So say if you do, you're feeling calm and stuff a few days before the interview, you write your checklist. Okay, I need to pack this, drink water, have a snack in the car ready to go. Prep those simple things. So even when you're nervous, you still do those things to support yourself before you go in.
Absolutely. And I think another tip is, sometimes you may go super early. Nothing wrong with that. You go super early or even early and you're waiting. Or sometimes you go on time, but the previous interview is running late. So obviously you sit in a lobby or a reception area. Maybe there's a reception staff there. Everything has been watched, okay? So just because you're sitting in the reception and not being interviewed doesn't mean that you will be on the phone loud and saying things and doing things. Even there, you could say, hey, look for a flyer of the business, pick it up. If there's the organization's magazine sitting on the table, take it, read it. You might find a point here or there in that. And obviously be hydrated well, have a nice meal in the morning. As Louise said, just relieve yourself if you need to, and just be in the frame that I'm going to really rock this interview. And more than likely you will.
That's it.
In that way. So I think we've spoken about the interview, and let's talk about the post-interview things you need to do, Louise. So you've been interviewed, hey, you've gone home. What should you be doing after the interview?
So even before you leave, you can ask, hey, when would I hear back from this? Yes. So that'll give you a kind of a bit of a timeline to also prepare for what to do afterwards as well. Yes. So say if they say, okay, by the end of the week, we'll send you a follow-up message. Then, you wait till the end of the week and you might not have gotten anything. Then it'd be like, okay, cool. Like maybe the following Monday, you'd be like, hey, just wondering wondering about that interview. So say if you haven't got that follow-up, you can inquire about that. That week after is a good time. If they don't give you an answer, or we don't know when we're going to get back to you, that week time is a really good time to just say, send an email, give them a call, be like, hey, just following up from that interview, just wondering to see if there's any next steps that I need to take right now.
Thank you for reminding me of that. I think, yes, asking so often employers or interviewers will say, is there anything you want to ask me? So even if you have no question, because they have answered it already, mention that. So that I did have questions. It gives an impression you did have questions. So again, if you have a notepad with you, you would have had some questions. And you said, look, I had these questions, but you already answered.
Yeah.
Okay. But some of this, as Louise said, is, hey, what's the next steps? When can I hear from you? Okay. And then if they say, can you provide us some referee details? So have it handy on a paper copy and hand it in that, hey, I've got. So go prepared with the referee details to the interview so you can hand it in, because it just reduces the time of waiting for anyone, and they can pretty much start calling the referees the same evening, which improves your chances, in the interview process. So do that. And as I said, have the questions handy, and nothing wrong in reading from there. And as Louise said, is after the interview, come home, you follow. But again, I'll repeat the other reminder is that make sure you check your junk mail, check your inbox, and take messages. Okay. There and again, one thing I would say, and it also applies to the after resume stages, make sure your phone busy greeting is respectful and nice. Some of them were not so good when I used to call people, right? And also another thing which probably comes from a personal perspective, that there will be people calling from non-English speaking backgrounds to book you in for an interview. It's not always telemarketing people. so, so if you have applied for a job, more than likely there will be a person sounding similar to telemarketing who is actually calling to book you in for an interview. And don't upset that person. That might cost you your job. So be a bit open in that phase of your life, okay? So Louise, am I making sense on that
Yeah,
one?
you're making sense on that one. You know, answer your phone if you're waiting for a call back for an interview, even just that in general.
Perfect.
But I think from there, that's, you know, the interview process wrapped up.
Yes.
We'll talk a bit more about, you know, when you get the job, what to do next before you start in our next episode.
Perfect. Well, I think so. And those who are listening to this episode, watching this in preparation for the interviews, good luck with the job, and do let us know in the comment section if this has helped.
Yeah, definitely. And we'd like to thank Breed Australia for the use of the Sunrise Studio to record these podcasts. And we'll see you in the next episode.
See you in the next episode.